Okay, I see a few of us on here. I'm just going to give another minute or so for others to jump on. Make sure we have everybody. Okay, I have 101, which is pretty much on time in my book. So even before I introduced myself, I thought in the spirit of wellness, mental health, stress reduction, right? As we reduce stress, our mental health gets better. I thought I could ask us all to just kind of sink in and take a breath. In my introduction, I'll let you know I am a yoga and meditation teacher. Probably spurred on by the first 25 years of my career. But I think we forget how powerful a conscious breath is, right? Whenever anyone's upset or anything else, we ask them to take a breath. But it also helps you become present. So I'm hoping that you're on here, to really engage and gain some insight and to get inspired, even to take one little next right action in creating this culture that really our employees are demanding from us these days. So, this isn't one that you're watching while you're checking your email or, whatever the case might be, that you're really present here. So to help that, you can either gaze down at the floor or the desk, or if you're comfortable shutting your eyes, you can go ahead and shut your eyes. And again, just noticing your regular breath and where it's landing. And if you've been stressed today, it might be right here. It might not get past your chin very much. To reduce stress, we want to bring it all the way down to our belly. So as you start noticing, just bringing that breath down to the belly, and then from the belly up, chest, throat out the nose. 2 more times, just like that. Maybe you find your shoulders relaxing on that exhale. And one more time. And then opening your eyes whenever you're ready, you're lifting your gaze, but just again, noticing, right? That, wow, this is something I could offer for my employees or for myself, especially before I'm about to have a difficult conversation or give a presentation. So, maybe that was a little bit more for me than you. And sorry, I'm just going to close this window because, of course, the weed whacking starts right at 1 o'clock. Sorry about that. Oh, gracious. So, introduction. Like I said, my story kind of lends itself to this topic. My name is Sara Martin. I'm a senior HR consultant for GTM. I've been here for about 3 years now, and I didn't picture myself making a career change in my 50s, right? And I wasn't at the magic number to make a career change, but I worked for a company for about 20 years. It was a grocery retailer, and 100-year-old company, might be 120 of these now. Very hierarchical, very patriarchal, right? Like most companies, any companies, I think, older than 30 years, that's a lot of times that's what the structure was, right? It's top down. And what was really celebrated was how hard you worked and the number of hours that you worked. So, I worked 80 hours last week. I don't know if anybody else has ever been in that competition game of just how busy someone is or how many hours or how hard they worked. But that, can become a culture. And that can become a culture of, not only not supporting mental health, but hurting it. If you do some Googling, which I have some statistics for us, but not a ton because, I just don't know how reliable Google really is these days. But I'm sure all of you, right, can even think like, one of my biggest stressors is work. So, not only do we want to look at the side of, what's the culture like, and are we supporting people who are already coming to us with challenges or may come upon challenges because of life events? What's our culture like, period? And are we contributing to, negative mental health or positive mental health? So, I was a real advocate for people. I loved what I did. I'd like to think that I put the human in human resources. People weren't, totally used to that. I really cared about the people who were working 8 hours a week. And as I grew and did some things to change things in my life so that I wasn't so stressed out, and I did get into yoga and learn how to calm my nervous system, which there's many other ways besides yoga. Again, just taking that nice concentrated breath can do wonders. But I realized that I'd always been a really sensitive person. So, COVID in the grocery business was a lot. And we were the hotline deciding who could go to work, who couldn't. The system was brilliant, but it was also like, who's working the most and the hardest? Celebrate those people who haven't slept in 3 days. And I think the max was about 11 days in a row. And my nervous system just wasn't wired for that anymore. And I didn't need, in the first probably 15 years, some of my, I'll say, mental health challenges, made me a perfectionist, made me a type A. I wanted that attention. I worked 60 hours a week with a 6-month-old at home. And, but things start to shift where you're like, wait, I want to go to the baseball game. I want to, make sure I'm present for my family and any, hobbies or things that you have going on. So I made a very hard decision after finding that, like, people were crying and not feeling like valued, that was a very hard environment for me to work in. And if I couldn't advocate for people, then I wasn't really doing my job very well. So I guess, not to be arrogant, but driving home the fact that you can lose good people who care an awful lot by not noticing what was going on, or by just driving home this culture of, how hard are you working and how many hours. So that's something to consider, what your current culture is, and we'll talk about a way that you can do that for sure. So I have the pleasure now of working at GTM, like I said, for over 3 years now. And this is a company that I feel really walks their talk. And, again, not to put down that retailer, they're, who knows where they have gotten to by now, but that's a big ship to turn, right? That's 25,000 people, and it's been that way for 80 years. So that's a big ship to turn. Whereas, GTM's 100 people. It's very entrepreneurial. We have wellness committees. I'm also the wellness coordinator here. We have diversity committees. We have a fun club. There's just, we have community engagement opportunities. So there's a lot of opportunities for people to come together, which really is one of the biggest indicators, right? Connection is a big indicator for mental health. And we'll talk about that as well. So I thank you all for being here. And we'll go ahead and talk about what we will cover. So we'll talk about how do we foster a supportive culture, certainly be taking questions as well. We'll offer practical resources. We'll talk about job flexibility. I've encountered a lot of mixed feelings on that, and I do find it fairly generational. Training leadership, which is something, certainly GTM can be helpful with. Measuring and adapting through feedback. So we'll talk about that as well. So did you know that a study published by the Lancet Psychiatry Journal, cited by Harvard in 2023, said that 50%, I did tell you I would enter some stats in here, that 50% of Americans will experience at least one mental health condition by age 75. So certainly, we're a much more open culture, and we'll talk about that. I find that to be generational too, of, who's willing to talk about what. And, geez, have we gone to the other extreme where, everything is anxiety producing, because it can be, but if we, so I won't ask for a show of hands, but if you think about it, I think we all have, either sometimes it's genetic and we're born with certain tendencies, or a life event happens. And we're going to talk about COVID and the last 5 years, and, again, why some of these diagnoses are up, why people are looking to their employers for support, because there's not, a lot out there sometimes, depending what their community is like. So also 2023 Gallup study said that depression diagnoses were at an all-time high of 29%. So it's still hovering around 28%. And again, these are, some stats that came in as reliable. Certainly low income and younger folks who are just trying to figure out, who they are, what they're doing, struggle more with this. Obviously, the more resources you have, the more that you can, take care of any issues that you might have. And you probably have less stress in your life if you're not worried about putting food on the table. Now, again, diagnosis goes up with awareness, right? I can go to my doctor now and say, I feel like I'm having a depressive episode, or, I feel, I'm having thoughts that are, don't seem like they're based in reality, So we have better language to go talk and ask for these things. So that may be part of the diagnosis increase. But certainly in the last 5 years, if we think about everything that's gone on, I don't know about you, but I could just crawl under a blanket and stay there. And I've made a commitment not to do that. And I feel lucky that I get to meet with people like you who are raising your head and your hands and saying, okay, how do we be part of this solution? But it's sticky. It's tough right now, right? So, COVID, I think, really did a number on people. Like I said, the feelings of isolation can really lead to that feeling depressed, can make it hard to interact socially. I know I had a lot of challenging cases when it was time to come back to work, that people, really have a lot of fear around being sick. Obviously, one of our biggest fears is of dying. So when there's a pandemic going on, and if people are consuming media 24/7, they're just being sold fear over and over and over. So that can be very paralyzing. And then you have, certainly, racial discrimination, political division, economic stress, social media, where people seem to be able to say whatever they want on social media without regard to other people's feelings, right? And then we have someone, very prevalent here, making it okay, really, to, say really crude and rude things to others and about others. And that affects people's mental health. So, certainly the addiction was on the rise quite a bit with COVID. And again, they often say that the opposite of addiction is connection. So that's why, 12-step programs work. That's why community works. That's why at work, a wellness committee. We're going to talk about cross-function work teams and those kinds of things that can be helping counteract this environment that we're in. So of course, there's a business case for mental health. When your people are feeling good, they're productive, they're engaged, they're not, again, when you're plugged in, maybe you have somebody who had a loss of a baby, or that you're willing to be there for the tough situations so that somebody just doesn't disappear, right? Because a lot of times somebody will feel shame around this, and we're going to talk about the stigma, and what you can do to start minimizing that. Certainly, depending where you're starting, you don't want to just go from 0 to 60, because there's other people who think we shouldn't be talking about this at all, right? So that's the hard part of all of our work challenges, right? Of you can't please everybody, uh, but you need to understand what your vision is, what your values are when it comes to supporting mental health and wellness in your workplace. So the other thing is attracting talent, right? So I have a theory that people come to work expecting their bosses to really treat them like their parents treated them, right? So, in my old career, when I first got there, people were yelling at each other. Like it was actually even before that, one of my first weeks on the job, I think I was 22 years old, and I can't even, there was a curse word, I can't even say it on this webinar, yelled and swore at me. And I was brave enough at 22 to go down and tell this man that I don't learn well like that. Because he's, again, I was new there, so he said, I don't receive well that way. Which is a big deal, really, if I think about it now. But so again, there's a lot of jokes and memes out there about Gen X, right? We weren't raised with emotions. We were sent out after cartoons on a Saturday and don't come home till dark, right? Uh, be seen and not heard, or actually, I don't even really want to see you. So it was a much different upbringing than, and I get a little sarcastic about this, so forgive me. But there's a lot of rewards going on. So I'll say, sometimes, kids were, given trophies for thinking about going to soccer practice. So, there's a lot of advocating from parents, right? I'm not sure we're letting, and me included, right? I've got my own, but hopefully we did a good job of, you got to let them fall down once in a while, right? Because that's where the resiliency comes from. So I'm finding in my consulting role at different clients, different younger folks may need a little help with resiliency and accepting criticism, that it's not the end of the world if I'm asking you to improve a work product. So this is, where some training can come in. We offer this, I believe, NAMI is the National Association for mental illness, and they may have even changed their name to mental wellness, but there's a lot of educational materials out there too, and we can send those to you via email along with some apps that I'm going to share as well. So making sure your leaders, first of all, know what the values are, having real honest conversations about it, because again, some people are, I'm not touching that with 10-foot pole, so you have to know where you're starting. And again, it's a very divided environment right now. So, it can be difficult. And so this is where to involve your HR department. If you're not on here from human resources, or if you are human resources, right? Call somebody that is like an expert in diversity. Make sure you have training coming in. I always, kind of phone a friend to brainstorm and, how do I deal with this challenging person? And sometimes it might become a performance issue. Or hey, I guess our values don't really align here. If this is, where you're at in thinking, certain people shouldn't even really be allowed to work here. I've encountered that. then I think maybe our values aren't aligned. And those are really difficult conversations to have. But these are the conversations that most of the generation coming in are expecting us to have. And good for them. Good for them. I went to an awesome speaker. Oh, I think it was about 6 months ago. And it was a gentleman who was on the spectrum, and I think it was like 15 years ago, he was working for an organization, an autism organization, and wanted to talk about the fact that he was on the spectrum. They're like, oh, no, 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 please don't do that. Please don't do that. So, and I love this definition, and maybe I should have started with the definition of like, what is mental health, and we'll talk about, what a resilient environment looks like. But his definition was being able to bring your full self to work, right? And that can be a scary thing sometimes, like, because he had to hide a part of himself, right? And it would have helped in what he was doing. So the fact that he wasn't allowed to talk about it, is just so different now. But we have to be super sensitive, because some people may want to talk about it. Some people, it's like, it's not my job to educate. Some people are like, please don't draw attention to it. So we have to be willing as leaders, and we have to educate our leaders how to have these tough conversations. So, certainly GTM has resources that can help with that. Flexibility in work, we will talk about that. In fact, I was at a yoga training, and I was talking to a woman who just started this new job as an admissions counselor at the college, but she was teaching like 8 classes across the street. And she said, it was a non-negotiable for me. And now she's Generation X, right? So Gen X is also waking up and saying, wait a minute, I can't live this way with my nervous system, shot. And I'm doing these things that are really important to me. And this university worked around her teaching yoga. And again, now, other people are going, and, when we're calmer, we're more focused and we're more productive. So we'll talk about that as well. Respect and empathy, again, sometimes needs to be taught. Some people come by it very naturally, but certainly in some harassment prevention training, sensitivity training, definitely recommend that for leaders and for everyone, really. So as we said, it's super important with the current challenges and with the shifting employee expectations. There's a business case for making sure that we're willing to talk about it, knowing where we're at, and identifying our challenges and developing a plan. So, I talked about employee expectations. There's a lot of things, that COVID, I think, really did for us as far as, changing the way that we work. Again, I'm finding those who were just like, we are going back 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and that might be part of the business, right? Obviously, retail workers can't not show up. But again, maybe some more of their work is done on the internet, right? More people are Instacarting, more people are door dashing. So there is a ton of change going on and coming our way, right? Which is stressful in itself. So, change management is another thing to help people through, to help people know that that is one of the only guaranteed things. And we bring in, AI, and that's only changing quicker, faster, more. So we, want to stay plugged into that. We want to use technology to our advantage. And we'll talk about, some apps and some ways you can use. I think one of the questions was how you can use your EAP and employee assistant programs. If you don't have one, write it down. That is your first step. EAP is the way to go. It saves people like myself who, in my younger years, wanted to solve other people's problems. That's not my job. I am not the therapist. But again, if you're in human resources, you might feel like you wear that hat quite often, because sometimes people do just need to speak out loud. And then you can, kind of ask them what the solutions are. But Certainly there is a lot of shifting expectations, but AI can be helpful too, right? Like chat GPT help me develop a program that supports mental health in my organization. I mean, don't take it verbatim, and then, see what you think of it. So it can be helpful. So stigma is a huge thing. Like I said, it's evolved over time. My mother actually worked in the mental health unit for 30 some years of a hospital. So it was, around me as a kid. So I don't really know, and again, it just really depends, what your family was like, what people talked about. But my kids talked about social anxiety. It was like at 14, 15 years and being awkward. I'm like, I just thought something was wrong with me. Right? And again, I won't ask for raising of hands, but silently raise your hand if you were like, oh my gosh, or to this day, right? But the fact that we get to name it, we get to call it out and know that everybody struggles with it can really back off the thought of something's wrong with me, which affects your mental health. So, I love that the conversations are so much more open. But again, we'll talk about when they're too open, right? Because too much of a good thing, can certainly create other challenges. But certainly we have limited resources. It's not just our people that are facing economic challenges, but I will share a lot of free ones with you. And the biggest resource that you have is right here, is these ears. It's just listening. So many times it's all people want. They don't want a solution to their issue, right? They want you to listen and let them know, oh my gosh, that must be hard. I'm sorry you're going through that. And sometimes they might need a solution, but most of the time it's just to be seen and heard. So that can be big. That can be challenging when many of us are doing jobs of two or three people, but really making sure, if somebody is struggling or wants your attention, that you give it to them. And if you can't do it right then you can set another time. So we will talk about measuring success too. That was on there too. So we always want an ROI. I think companies are starting to, just from an integrity standpoint, wanting to do the right things. So measurement's important, but a little difficult. But we'll talk about some ways that you can do that. So as I said, normalizing conversations, leading by example. And again, it's a tough call, how much to share, how much you're comfortable sharing, how much you're willing to share. That's where training, I think, can start opening those conversations a little bit. Wellness groups, we'll talk about ways to start having those conversations. But I work with a wonderful organization. I'm going to name them my name because I know she wouldn't mind, but it's South End Children's Cafe in downtown Albany. And we instituted something called courageous conversations, right? So the word trauma is thrown around a lot these days, right? So things get popularized in the mental health space as well. But everybody has some form of trauma. I call it little t, big T, right? So there's big T trauma and little t trauma. And these are the things that stick with us and build our belief systems, and sometimes can get really misinterpreted, or we can get stuck on them, and they do affect our mental health. So there's a lot of traumatic things just going on in the environment where this space is located, and they feed inner city kids. They have a after school program, they help with homework, they do all these things. And we instituted something called the courageous conversation because again, I keep wanting to ask a raise of hands for uncomfortable conversations, and this might just be a me thing, but any email from my boss at my old job, my shoulders came up, my gut, tightened, like the stress was there. And I automatically went to, you did a bad job, because of the criticism I received, as I was growing up. It was ingrained in me. Authority means criticism. It'd be like, and then I read the email and like, great job on so and so. So we brace ourselves when anybody says, can I talk to you? Or if it's the boss, like knowing the hierarchy. Like I used to tell my store managers, listen, like you're intimidating just because you're the store manager. I know you think you're, so approachable, but people are scared because you're the boss. So, having that awareness, I think is certainly helpful. So maybe making sure that you're kind of knocking down that hierarchy. And if you do need to have a difficult conversation, not ambushing somebody, right? That's usually when things go wrong. Sometimes out of necessity, you have to have it in the moment. But a lot of times, if you're going to have a difficult conversation with somebody, just saying, hey, I have to have, a pretty tough conversation with you. Do you have time to do that today? Or would you prefer tomorrow morning? Like, you don't want to give too much, they'll be like, yeah, we'll do that next year. But you want to give a little window so that they can emotionally and mentally prepare, right? And that is a huge shift, but super helpful. So that might be, if you wrote down EAP and if you wrote down, making sure that people know that you're having a difficult conversation. And again, you can't always prepare for that. Sometimes you think you're going to have a lovely conversation and it goes south and it feels difficult in the moment. And that's at the point where you say, you know what? I don't think this is being productive anymore. And you can stop stressful conversations and put them on pause and revisit when everybody has taken those breaths, right? Or slept on it. 24 hours is a beautiful window to have a different perspective. So certainly leading by example by, doing that, and again, your comfort level of sharing where you're at with things, as far as, your own challenges. Oh my gosh, I went to this, it's okay to be human and to make a mistake as a leader. That's important too. And owning that, of course, promoting inclusivity. So certainly making sure you have diversity on your teams, that can help you grow and recognize things that maybe you need to be adding into your work environment. Looking for early signs, right? Again, another head down, hand raised of how many times have we know someone's stressed, we know someone's working 60 hours a week, but we need them to, so we look the other way and we don't ask. Or there's certain people that if you ask them, they're just like, oh, but you want to make sure that, and again, if you're going to ask, you want to have a solution. But we want to make sure we're paying attention. And hey, guess what? If it's 60 hours this week, why don't you take Monday off? Or, those kinds of things, making sure that we're asking, what people need. So certainly employee assistance programs, I should have made that font a lot bigger. Like I said, that is the one thing you want to write down, because when you get to really sticky things, right, we are not mental health experts, any of it. So we have to be very careful. We don't want to be giving advice. We have an EAP program that has counselors available and they can call them. So that is, making sure, and if it's not a full-blown EAP, make sure, you do know where people can access counselors. Hopefully there are resources locally where, if people are low income, that they can get some help. And again, it might just be your local hospital. But, being informed and making sure people know where they can get help. And again, somebody asked about EAP and how to maximize that. And, EAP these days is amazing. They'll come in, most of them anyway. I know ours is fantastic. They'll come in and do trainings. So like maybe a financial wellness planning can certainly help with mental health, a presentation on mental health. What does it mean? What does it look like? What are these buzzwords? And some people are like, oh, I won't do that. Everyone will be diagnosing themselves. But awareness is certainly key, and can help, just again with being current with what is expected from the people showing up to work for you, and making sure your good people are taken care of. Because the other thing is, the longer we live, the more challenges we have usually, right? So you might have somebody who's stellar for 20 some years, or, just like my story, I started doing more work on it. I started getting more sensitive. I stopped numbing out as much as I was, and that was kind of part of the culture. And it was kind of like, ugh, go away. I wasn't, it didn't feel, I didn't feel accepted because I wasn't part of that party crew, or, those kinds of things. So just be really honest when you take your inventory, and certainly we'll offer something that can help with that as well. So, like I said, we will send these to you. There's lots of great mental health apps, and maybe your next step is as simple as a monthly wellness newsletter. And I'm just going to start, including some resources in there. And maybe you have somebody try an app each month and they give a little review, or we're going to talk about, people gathering. Like I said, people together are really helpful. And I know I've got to watch my time here, but, that even just putting on a 20-minute podcast or a 20-minute educational thing from an app, and you sit and listen to it, and then you talk about it for 10 minutes. Like, you don't have to be the expert. There's so much material out there. So we can flip through those other ones. So we talked about leadership training, and again, just making sure that we're paying attention. Active listening is definitely a skill we can all work on every single day, because most of us are listening to respond, and they don't really want to hear your story. They want to be heard. There's great trauma-informed training out there. I believe, oh gosh, it's not going to come to me, but it's it's not Wildwood. It might be Wildwood. They help place people with disabilities, and it's a trauma-informed workforce. The minute you come in, their part of their onboarding is telling you, what does this look like? How can you be trauma sensitive? Because again, you don't know what people have been through, right? When I talked about mental illness, and that, 50% of us will deal with it at some point. I'm sure you can think about somebody in your family, someone close to you who has dealt with this. And, what would you do to support them? So sometimes you can bring more compassion or empathy to a person to say, okay, what if this was my brother, my mother, my sister? Okay, so this is a topic that I've definitely had to help with, because on the other side of things, I'm anxious about giving this presentation, which is a normal, like there's anxiety that is part of life that I have just twisted just to be excitement, right? Or nervousness. So but an anxiety disorder can be crippling, can be like, I can't leave the house because I'm petrified that I'm going to get some disease, or something like that, right? So again, these terms I feel like have been thrown around a little bit loosely. So, there are ways to ask questions, and this is where I say get a partner. To make sure you're talking over, hey, this is the issue that's coming up, and maybe it's somebody oversharing and talking about their mental health issue, on a daily basis, and that's okay to say, hey, listen, we need you to focus on your work productivity. Certainly, what can we do to support? But I would ask that, maybe you keep some of the personal information to a minimum. So that's a way you could have a conversation with somebody who may overshare about whatever it is. It's not always just mental health issues, or I've definitely been overshared with many occasions on many topics. So it's okay to say, oh, wait 1 second. Either I have stuff to do, we have stuff to do, redirect the conversation. Certainly knowing your laws, your leave of absence laws. So New York sick leave that's available. that people are accruing as they work, FMLA, disability, and allowing for people to go take that time to take care of themselves. I can remember a store manager lost her husband of like 30 years, but it was the holidays. This was right after COVID too, I think. It was the holidays. He died like mid-October. She worked all the way through the holidays, and then she was not well. So, and I had to convince her, you have to get away from here, and she came back, wonderfully. She's still there. So sometimes we have to figure out ways to let people go take care of themselves. We talked about go ahead, sorry. Yeah, we got to watch time here. That's fine. That's fine. You're good. So we did talk about, supportive cultures. I wanted to talk about peer learning and peer groups, right? So, anytime you're getting people together, even if, like I said, it's a different topic like community involvement, you are providing a space for people to feel good about their contribution, which increases, mental health and positivity. So, any kind of cross functional work teams, I think that might be on the next one. And it's not, but I will talk about it. I think maybe it's on the next one, but that's okay. So cross-functional work teams. This is one of my favorite things I did for the company that I worked for. That if you have a work challenge, like maybe it's mental health in the workplace, how are we going to address this? Get some people from different departments of different backgrounds and have them start talking about it. What do you think the plan should be? And it's not that you're going to agree to all of it, but it gets them, engaged, and it gives them a voice. So, it could be this topic. It could be, how are we increasing sales by, 25%, but people like to be challenged and engaged. So certainly checking on your people one-on-one. Job satisfaction surveys are another way. So with the job satisfaction survey, maybe you add on a lot of work-life balance questions, can kind of indicate mental health, and whether they feel like they're supported as a whole person. Because again, as soon as 20, 25 years ago, maybe even 15, it was like check your stuff at the door, right? You weren't allowed, it was not embraced to bring this stuff to work. So now it is the norm and it is the expectation. So certainly, being transparent in any changes, making sure your policies are regularly updated as well. I think we've covered all of that. So, we talk about resilience in the workforce, that, we want to make sure that we're allowing for that. And the rewards are, right, the shared accountability, open communication, stronger relationships, higher retention, right? If I feel valued as a whole person, I'm staying. I'm staying. Like I said, to say that I love working here, it feels so good. And then you can play to people's strengths too, right? The more you're getting to know them, the more you can utilize their strengths. So again, with the engagement, giving purpose-driven work, making sure people are not bored. The continuous improvement teams that I talked about, that cross-functional, all the different committees that you might involve people in, making sure that there's rewards and recognition and that they're consistent. There never goes a month where there is not an employee of the month, and they do an interview with them. And so for those of us in the field, we get to know them a little bit more. There's, a significant reward for that. But sometimes, technology can help with this too. In our payroll system I solved, there's a reward program that can be utilized. And people get recognition that way, which is amazing. And of course, growth opportunities, people are always looking for. So we talked about reducing turnover, and we talked about boosting productivity. Certainly, we all know, right? If you slept good the night before, you had a nice meal with the family as opposed to some kind of argument or stressor or whatever, we show up to work better, right? So, that's why we do want to support and know what's going on with our people as whole individuals. We can lower burnout rates by making sure people are taking time. Some people almost need to be forced, right? Working can be an addiction. That's where they get the most pleasure and they can avoid the rest of their lives, right? So certainly making sure that all employees feel free to speak up, which might mean working on your own cause or calling on people specifically. And knowing that there's resources like this creates a strong morale and also innovation and creativity. If people can speak up more and you have a diverse workforce, you're going to have more creative solutions to your business issues. So there's some success stories here. We are pretty much out of time here, but you'll see Unilever, you'll see Google, Johnson & Johnson, Microsoft. I want to say that Guy Madelone, who is our CEO, told me about Zappos, that they got to go tour Zappos and that there was a life coach available, like somebody that's supporting the outside parts of their life. Because again, those resources are hard to find. And if I'm a mess at home, it's coming to work with me. Even when we told people not to, back when, it was coming to work with them. So, we do want to have a holistic approach. So again, we want a strategic integration as far as it's just part of what we do, making sure you're okay as a whole human being. Again, holistic support from physical, mental, nutritional, and again, some of that's just through trainings. Maybe can't fund benefits for part-time or whatever that is, but like, what are we doing to offset that? Leadership and culture. So again, do not even start this if your really top leaders do not buy in and believe in this. It's probably those are conversations that we need to keep having, and maybe encourage them to talk to somebody about what are the actual financial benefits, which I think are maybe on the next slide. Yes, they are. So, Google says $1 invested returns $4 in productivity and reduced healthcare costs. I believe that wholeheartedly, and that maybe even more. Again, and it doesn't take huge investments. That's the neat thing. It really is a culture. It really is how your leaders proceed. It really is about saying good morning. It really is knowing that someone's dog is sick, and considering that they might not be themselves today. So these are things to certainly be aware of. I think we covered all of that. We talked about stigma. One thing you can stay on this, Trevor, but the one thing I did want to talk about with stigma of asking if it's okay to ask questions or give suggestions, right? So before you're like, hey, have you tried Insight Timer? Or, again, because some people could take offense to it. So always say, hey, are you open to suggestions? Is it okay if I ask more questions? Because some people don't want to talk about this at all. It's not anybody's business, right? Because we still have HIPAA. It still is, so that's where the fine line is. But I think, COVID kind of pushed through that as well. So if somebody's talking about it, just, hey, can I ask more questions? So you'll see more preventative care focus, integrated digital health. Actually, somebody else that was in my yoga training, she became a physician. She's a young woman, and she's like, "Oh my God, the medical system is not in line with a lot of the things she believes in, and how people can be taking care of their nervous system in order to take care of their bodies." And so she's going on digital health, which may have a little more flexibility. And certainly personalized well-being plans, that life coaching that Zappos does could, would be definitely seen as, on the cutting edge. So in order to build that resilient and thriving team, you want trust, you want support, and you want growth. So, again, maybe that's something that you write down and that you put in your peripheral, like, am I creating this with my direct reports and my team? So again, staying current, you want to foster a supportive culture. You want to offer practical resources. Like I said, maybe the next step here is just a weekly news or a monthly newsletter. Don't overcommit, but some kind of newsletters, a monthly training, a quarterly training, something that where we're going to start talking about this stuff. Being more open to job flexibility when possible, training your leadership, and of course, measuring and adapting through feedback. So we offer a lot of things that can help. I mean, an HR consultant, period, if you don't have an HR department, like I said, that was always to my store managers, I would tell them, and it was department managers, it was anybody in leadership, that it is my job to keep you out of trouble. Right? So the more education we can do, what can I say? What can I say? How do I have that conversation? So having an HR consultant can be helpful for if you are, a smaller size company that maybe doesn't have the funding for a whole HR department. And we have a lot of different offerings there. Certainly an environmental audit, as far as a list of questions of asking culture review, thank you, of asking people, how supported they feel at work, is something that we offer, and certainly training as well. Any questions? I know I went over here, but I appreciate you guys hanging on here. I think it's just really important conversation. I hope I answered it. I know one question was how to leverage EAP. What was the other question, Trevor? Oh, sorry, it's right here. Okay. Yes, we can share these slides. Absolutely. And thank you, Lynn. I'm not sure. Trevor, does this get recorded? It does look like it's recording. Yes.
Yes, everyone will get an email this afternoon with the link to download the presentation as a PDF and a link to video recording.
Okay, wonderful. That's my 50 plus memory. I've done this several times. I should know the answers to these questions, but that's part of humility as a leader, of making sure that, that's kind of leading by example, to make sure that you don't have to be perfect, and then your people don't, feel that they have to be that way as well. So any other questions? All right, well, here's our contact information, and certainly you have our email, so feel free to reach out, and please just keep the conversation going. Even if you go home and talk to somebody about this, at home, again, sometimes just sharing it, we don't know, I love, there's that meme, right? We don't know what people are carrying underneath, lots of smiles, right? I always think about Robin Williams, of, somebody who made us laugh so hard, or at least me, but he was carrying a lot of mental health issues for sure. So thank you so much. Thank you, Trevor, for co-piloting.